Hello, Aaron. It's good to see you.
Marcus, good to be with you today.
Man, what a treat to be able to spend a little time together with our colleagues at Upswell, independent sector, uh, to be able to talk a little bit about power and trust and relationships, um, and the way in which they all come together for real change. This is something that is really close to my heart and to my colleagues and team at Geo. But I also know that this is something that for Ncrp that's really close to you and the work that you do. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like to just set this up a little bit for us and for all of you out there who have taken the time to be with us. And thank you so much for that on a Friday morning. There's so many other things that you could be doing now. We really do appreciate that. I want to set the tone, kind of set the table for the session. I like to say create the container a little bit so we can make this the most valuable use of time for everyone involved. We really want you to walk away feeling like, wow, I'm so glad I participated in this conversation. So first, we want to just say welcome. We want to invite you to just really just relax, to enjoy the space, the time, to be present with us, to not worry so much about the thing that's happening next, uh, to be attentive to the different thoughts and emotions that you might be bringing into this conversation, and really just allow yourself an opportunity to be here, just right now, being here. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing else to do. We made it. We're together, and we want to just allow this space and time together to be in service of the reason we're in this work in the first place. Right? We all come from such a diverse range of backgrounds. Uh, we want the experience, the benefit of your points of view, your observations, your lessons to really inform the conversation that happens in this space. Right. So thank you for that. Um, and if we do our best around that, if we can suspend what we know and really enter into this space with a kind of curiosity, um, if we can ask questions and be open to disagreeing but still remaining open to consideration within that space of disagreement, then we believe we'll set the tone and create the conditions for learning, right? And at the end of the day, uh, Aaron, I know you to be one of the learning leaders whom I admire so much, and the kind of leader that I aspire to be. So we'll discuss some concepts that may be familiar, but maybe we'll offer them in a way, again, in the spirit of curiosity and learning that you haven't necessarily considered them before or defined them before. We'll also explore what it feels like to be in this work and the kind of support that we need to sustain the work. Right? So I'm asking you to both think about your personal involvement when it comes to change, when it comes to trust, when it comes to relationships and power. But then, what's required to sustain, or dare I say, elevate the work? So we'll explore that together today. All right. And I've been talking enough. Aaron, why don't you start us off by introducing yourself and kind of give us a sense of what's going on at Ncrp right now, and then I'll follow you up.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. And right back at you with the admiration for your leadership in the sector. For those who don't know me, I'm Aaron Dorfman. I'm the president and CEO of the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy. Grant making foundations and ultra high net worth donors. So we push and persuade and cajole philanthropy to be more responsive to those with the least wealth, power, and opportunity in our society. Couple of big initiatives for us right now. The Power Moves toolkit. We're trying to help philanthropy get better about how it wields, builds, and shares power. Another big initiative for us is our Movement Investment Project. We're trying to get philanthropy better at supporting movements, movements are critical to advancing justice and fairness in our society. And philanthropy has historically been really bad at supporting and engaging with movement groups. So we've been focusing on the pro-immigrant, pro-refugee movement, reproductive access, and gendered violence. We're adding a focus soon on the climate justice movement, as well as just more general work to help the field get better at supporting movements of all kinds. And finally, Ncrp Impact Awards is another one of our big initiatives. The celebration for this year's winners is next week. That's where we shine a spotlight on some of the best grant makers who are really leading the way in terms of equity and justice. So yeah, great to be with you all. I'm looking forward to digging into the conversation today.
Yeah,
Tell
I
us
love.
about what's up with Geo.
What's up with us? Well, I'm Marcus Walton, President and CEO at Grant Makers for Effective Organizations, GEO. And first, it's hard for me to even go to the next step without again expressing the kind of gratitude that I hold for being in this space. To be a philanthropy serving organization it has become a particular kind of distinction, right? Aaron, we have a privilege of being in these types of organizations that get to inform the different ways that philanthropy can be more effective in its work. Like you, my observation over the years has really shown that connecting to movements, the work that's happening on the ground toward change, is really critical. And we haven't done the best job, and as you mentioned, at doing that. And that's an understatement. I don't know to what extent we've collectively been intentional at all about enhancing the impact of the work on the ground that's happening within the communities. And so the vision for GEO, I've just wrapped up my second year. There's been 20 years of lifting up practices that enhance the connection to create a kind of simpatico, generative relationship between funders, nonprofits, and the communities that we serve. We talk about engaging with trust-based kinds of approaches to doing the work, providing flexible and reliable funding over a longer course of time, for example, for grantees. But now we've been more explicit about building upon the awareness of grant makers, and now focusing on the implementation of these principles. So not just an introduction of tools and frameworks, but an application of them. And to what end? Is toward thriving communities and the nonprofits that we're supporting through institutional philanthropy. And so we like to talk about GEO as a community of funders committed to transforming philanthropic culture and practices. And we do so by connecting members to the resources and relationships that are required to support thriving nonprofits and communities. All of that is important because transformation is the thing that brings us together. Those of us that are interested in changing the current conditions, right? And last year we saw that was a pretty large amount of people. It was a global number, perhaps, certainly beyond a critical mass of individuals who made a public proclamation that the status quo is not good enough, that is insufficient and unfulfilling. And so we see GEO, we offer GEO as a space to come together, a welcoming space, a space that's resource rich and curated to support the grappling of the complexities associated with integrating these ideas. We know that the hard part, the rubber hits the road when you take what you learned and try to make it real, when you try to establish it as new habits. And so we do that at GEO in a few ways. One is we have this amazing national conference. We come together. We're looking so forward to May 2022 in Chicago. We'll have the first national conference since 2018, because we do them every other year. And so the national conference is when we get to see who are the other leaders of change, the other people who are committed to transformation in the way that we outline it in our mission. and center it in equity and community-driven principles in the way that we describe it in our vision. But we also offer a fellowship experience, so a longer term set of experiences over the course of a year for up to 20 or 30 folks. Every year we've done 4 classes. Now we're wrapping up another just now. But there's the fellowship experience that, again, is focused on how we lead change in a manner that's centered in these principles that are equity focused and community driven. And lastly, I'll offer, and there's so many more ways, of course, even for what you all do at Ncrp. The other way that I think is important for the way we're talking about this today is our cohort experiences. We believe, and we have observed over the course of the 20 years, that learning alongside our peers with an eye for how change happens, in a particular eye towards how power flows, contributes to our collective learning. It is the critical space, the conditions that are required for us to learn together, for us to try new things, to be awkward, to be uncertain, to take the baby steps, to crawl before we can walk, right? And so GEO is that space that says, as long as you're committed to change in the way that we just outlined it, then we welcome you into the space. We'll meet you where you are. We'll provide you with the resources that are developmentally appropriate, if you will, whether you're awakening, whether you've been woke for a while and you're practicing different things, or whether you're on more of the advanced track and looking for others who are at the leading edge of the work. We partner with groups like you, Ncrp, Aaron, individuals like leaders like you, and we create a space to dig a little deeper into the details around into implementing that work in ways that help us move directionally toward a shared vision for effectiveness in the field. Wow, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I get so excited talking about this.
it's awesome. Love it.
Yeah. And so I talked a lot about kind of observations and the topics of trust and relationships, healing, power. What observations have you made, Aaron? Like, what convinces you that these are all of the right kinds of topics that are critical for our work?
Yeah, power is so important. And I think of 2 definitions of power that I find helpful. One is from Rashad Robinson, leader of Color Change. Power is the ability to change the rules. And another definition that I really like comes from my days as a community organizer. Power is a relational concept, and you have power in relation to someone else or another organization if you have the ability to help them or to hurt them in some way. If you can't help them and you can't hurt them, then you don't really have any power in relationship to them. And I want to lift up like 7 ways I've seen harm from funders in their relationship, and healing and changing our practices is really necessary. So just a couple of, and they look for nonprofits to carry out their strategy, and often it doesn't work because it wasn't informed by the people most affected by the problems.
Yeah.
Number 2, funders. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you probably broke up a little bit. We live in the world of virtual convening now. I wondered if you could repeat that first one again so we can appreciate the full heft of that observation.
Yeah, sorry, I seem to have an unstable internet connection today. First one was funders creating strategy without input from and collaboration with their grantees. Just so frustrating and maddening, and really causes harm. Second one I want to lift up is funders funding predominantly white organizations to do work in communities of color, instead of investing in BIPOC-led groups from those communities. Real harm gets done there. Third one, underestimating the capacity of groups led by people of color. We saw this especially when we were doing our work in the South for As the South Grows. So much underestimating goes on. Fourth one, funders strong arming grantees to take positions beneficial to the funders. You see this from corporate foundations all the time. If they've got regulatory interests, they'll put pressure on their grantees to back their preferred regulatory solutions. I've seen it from the big bank foundations, telecom companies. They're just using their philanthropy as an extension of their government relations work instead of for any true benefit for the community. And there's an example right now in Minnesota of this, the Otto Bremer Trust, of the trustees, because they've egregiously abused their power. And it came out at the trial last week that Junior Achievement, one of their grantees, one of the trustees called and berated the executive director because she hadn't reached out to the governor's office on behalf of the trustees. Just terrible abuses like that. Yeah. Three more here. Refusing to accept unsolicited proposals, and also not creating avenues for getting to know new groups. Just does a ton of harm and limits the potential of the sector, and we need to heal from that. Also, ridiculous application and reporting requirements. I know every nonprofit on this session today has, spent 15 hours preparing a $5,000 grant proposal. It does real harm. And then finally, 1-year project grants instead of offering multi-year general operating support. How are we supposed to solve the thorniest problems of our society with unstable funding? We've got to acknowledge all of these ways that harm has been done so that we can begin to correct it and to heal from it.
Yeah, man. Well, I heard. Thank you for laying those out. When I think about the topic of accessing power, trust, and relationships for real change, two of the terms that you mentioned in particular stand out for me. The power, because it is something that is always implicit. It's the background. It's the water that we are swimming in, right? But it's invisible, except when the impact is felt. But then healing, which it stands out because it's so it's something that we don't yet talk about as a mainstream consideration. Perhaps trust is a little more of a common variable that comes up in conversation, even though perhaps not as much. It's not, I wouldn't say normal to talk about trust in the same way that we talk about these more technical components of philanthropy. What I always appreciated about you as a leader and Ncrp as an organization is that you do share these kinds of observations, right, about the way in which philanthropy, institutional philanthropy, is operating against its own aims. And so I just want to acknowledge that, thank you. And I also want to pick up on power and healing, and maybe trust inside of that, as to just talk about why we at GEO and across our network of philanthropy servant organizations really believe that this is something that we should be more intentional about acknowledging. And I'm particularly picking up on what you said about if we don't acknowledge the harm that's been done, then we can't move forward we can't make the progress toward what I like to frame as thriving, right? And so for this group, what I didn't say is that please, we want you to see this part of the conversation as one that we're all involved in. So feel free to engage those chats. Go to the Q&A section if you like on your Zoom and list your questions. Send emails, but we want to hear your voices. Be sure, ask your questions. We welcome your participation, and we'll just keep the conversation going. As a part of that, you'll also have a little bit of time on the back end of this to do so. But at any point in this, if something resonates for you, we'd like to hear from you. Even if it's a thumbs up, arrows, asterisk, plus, plus, all of the different things, ways in which we can demonstrate alignment. Because we believe that no single institution or individual can affect the kind of change that we're all attempting to experience, that this is a collective effort, and it requires us all. And so, Aaron, I'd like to define power a little bit in a slightly different way. It's absolutely, I agree with how you talked about it, and I love what you offer from the color of change example of it's a relational, right? Power, to me, to simplify it, I like to think of it in terms of being able to both envision and materialize the conditions for thriving, right? Materialize, envision first, and materialize one's conditions for thriving. And the short way of saying that is to define one's reality, right? I'm operating from my own reality. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to do half of the things that I dare to do. But it's my relationship with you and other people that allows me to keep going. Like that's the secret to all of this. I can be in my own world all I want. I can summon the courage to be audacious in all of the different ways that align with my aspirations for how I want the world to be. But it's you, it's my colleagues, it's my team, it's the geo community, it's the people outside of philanthropy, or this a broad philanthropic sector that I need as a community to be involved, to hold me, right? When I feel seen, held, and heard, then I can be all in for change. But until I do that, then I'm not open to being in a relationship that is grounded in trust, right? So there's one of those other terms. What do I mean by that? My observation and what the geo community teaches us is that trust, right? We've all heard that change happens at the speed of trust, right? That's a Stephen Covey term from a business sector, right? Without trust, you can forget about being able to facilitate change. And I'm saying facilitate change because change is always happening. Change is inevitable. We don't make change happen. We influence how change is happening, right? There's another slight distinction. But if we don't understand that, then as leaders, we start getting in here attempting to force things to happen, and we create the kind of harm that you just outlined in those 7 principles. And so when I talk about trust, and I really, really think about trust, I thought about this coming into this conversation. I thought about my dad. It's so interesting. My father died at 58 years old. I'm about to turn 50 next year, right? And it's one of those things where, I was a kid when this happened. And never had a really close relationship with him. But I thought about him because he was a Vietnam veteran. And I think about trust as a way of establishing the conditions for mutual permission. And so my dad came into this because it was like, you know what? I saw him saying permission to move forward. I saw him on the helicopter that he engaged before he was shot down, and had a lifetime of kind of emotional withdrawal, right, trauma as a result of it, right? So this thing about mutual permission is how we think about trust, and I had never even thought about it before, except when this picture of my father going on his first tour of duty, thinking that he was just going to be a photographer, came to mind. Aaron, why am I sharing this thing about my father? Right? No one knows him. Like who, right? I'm sharing this because there's something about, as a leader, we generate trust. We cultivate and expand trust by sharing the things that are uncertain, by giving people a little insight into our vulnerabilities, by allowing our humanity to lead the work, right? By modeling the things that we believe, then we can hold philanthropy as an institution to a higher standard of modeling the centering of humanity in a way that it has not done, to a level of satisfaction that we all hold. In other words, in order for philanthropy to be more affirming, a space that is conducive to the conditions that affirm our collective humanity, that empower us to contribute all of our best ideas from our cultural backgrounds and heritages across a diaspora of identities. In order for that to happen, the leaders of philanthropy have an opportunity right now to do the same in every interaction. And so trust, to me, and power comes together because those of us who have the influence, the financial resources, as well as the ability to connect people together, convening power, we have an opportunity to transform the way, to establish a new normal, if you will, for how we operate together, and make that grounded in the principles of trust and relationship that are generative as opposed to extractive, right? In other words, that reinforce connection as opposed to transactions.
I love that vision, Marcus. That is great, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. You know, that's something I've often found challenging and difficult as a leader, and I'm working on, how I can be more authentic and vulnerable with my team, with our members and followers. And so thanks for
But you are,
modeling how to do that.
right? But let me say this, Aaron. One of the reasons why it was such a privilege for me to do this with you is that I know that you are grappling with that. I know how much of a challenge over time it has been. Not that you have some condition, not that you are so challenged that you can't bring yourself to share who you are, but I know that you have placed an intention on being this way, in a way that's different. Like it was uncomfortable for you. This has been uncomfortable for me. What those in the audience don't know, that I want them to know, is when I first came into this role at Geo, I called Aaron Dorfman. I said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about what it means to be a new CEO in these spaces." And what did you say? "Meet me over at the spot. Let's go to lunch. I got you." Right? And we had some pasta or whatever at one of your favorite places, and you just laid it out for me, man. And so it is important for me that anyone that's a part of this space, and shout out to my man Dan, the leader of independent sector. And by leader, I don't mean to suggest that there's only one leader, but the man at the helm who holds the big vision and a responsibility for executing that vision. I know, man, that we can talk about this all we want, but if we are not engaging each other in a way where it's experiential, then it's just one dimensional, right? We are not penetrating, we're not getting beneath the surface to really shift the behavior, the mindset of the sector. And that's what you embody. And together, the hope today is that the audience is getting a chance to get the real deal, unvarnished story of what it looks like to be one of the folks who are looked to facilitate the kind of change that hopefully triggers the kind of ripple effect across the broader sector, the broader group of organizations and systems that we all can contribute to.
Yeah. Marcus, I wonder, like, how do you trust someone who has harmed you? Like, how do you, how do you heal enough to do that and to move forward? Because it's hard.
Hey, man, thank you for asking that. Listen, and I'm going to, you already know, I'm going to tell it to you how I experience it. I forget the person who wrote this, but I came across a quote just before the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor incidents a year and a half ago or more, that talked about it described how we heal ourselves when we create out of rage. We heal ourselves when we create out of rage. And so, Aaron, I've spent a lot of years, over a decade, being an executive and leadership coach, right? Supporting other people through um, the to be able to respond to the inequities in systems, as well as interpersonal experiences of harm in ways that actually elicit, like bring out the best in us, and then be able to draw from those qualities in real time in a way that serves us best to respond to whatever is happening in the moment, right? And so, first, it's been a decade of training, of getting coached, and serving others. It's something about service to others that actually makes this stuff stick. Like, because I'm holding responsibility for ensuring the well-being of someone else, I just take that so seriously, sometimes even more than myself. So that's one. But when the rubber hits the road, I have to give myself that same kind of permission that I associated with trust. I have to give myself permission to explore possibilities in a different way. Before I even talk about whether I trust someone else, I have to really come to be honest with myself. Like, how much do I trust myself in this situation? That's why I could lean on you. When I didn't know what I was doing as CEO, I'd never done it before. At some point, there's a first time for everything, right? I've done some of the aspects of the work, which makes me qualified to explore it. But I needed assurance, man. I needed to cultivate confidence. I needed to be curious. I needed to ask questions. All of these things helped me establish the kind of grounding emotionally to then engage in the challenges, to then be able to disagree with others and be able to make the distinction of, like, oh, just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I reject you, your self-worth as a human being. And so it's kind of a getting in a routine of focusing more on our connection, our human experience, our shared humanity, and less about the transactions that bring us together, but creating space for both. And so, like, yes, we want to be transactional, and that doesn't become the limit, the boundary for our relationship. There's something more that we can develop in terms of possibilities together that can emerge from our transactions. But if I just restrict it to transaction, then I'm taking something from you, you're taking something from me. Then we become more competitive and less collaborative. Yeah, but it's challenging, man. I hope what you heard is that I'm willing to struggle. I'm willing to dare to believe that we have more in common than we have that separates us. But it's not a guarantee, Aaron. It's a trust. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I
Aaron,
hear that. I hear that.
what,
Um,
what, what
and
about what about you? If I may, what is it that, like, I saw you, man. I remember you being like I actually admire the way in which you see yourself. You get out there, you speak, you put it out there. You can be so fiery, but and it's from such a place of loving and caring. I remember a time where a conversation around healing, racial healing, you may have been like, man, sorry, man, I just can't. You just had like a low tolerance for the way in which it was being discussed. But I've seen a shift in that. Like, help me understand. For one, am I accurately depicting that? And then two, what was happening? What happened with you that made you say, like, no, there's something to this healing thing? And what are your ideas about that currently?
yeah, great question, Marcus. I was really skeptical of racial healing as a strategy for moving the country forward. I was, much more focused on righting wrongs, building power to achieve justice, and sort of forcing the changes that need to happen. Um, couple things have happened over the last lots and lots of people that I respect and admire think that racial healing is really important. And I have learned that when people I respect and admire keep lifting something up, I better pay attention to it. There's got to be something there that I might not be seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it. Um, and I think just seeing how people have struggled the last few years with what's been going on in our country. If we're going to build a beloved community, if we are going to have a society where everyone is thriving, um, we we can't just mandate that. Like people have to change um, personally as well, and so I wouldn't say I'm like a zealous convert yet, but I am
Oh, that's right.
learning and curious, and I'm in this racial healing certificate program at the Clinton School in Arkansas
With
with
me.
you, and yes, with you and others, and I'm really looking forward to that journey and expanding my own understanding of how we can facilitate the healing that is so needed.
Yeah, man. I mean, I have to admit, like, I got a little emotional listening to you because, one, I just have been a part of this journey. It's a real honor to have known you for now over a decade since my days at the Association of Black Foundation Executives, then at Borealis as a funder and kind of grappling with a way to be partners and do things differently in that space, and now as a colleague at GL. I've seen that progression, man. And the thing that kind of brought up the tears was how it was a humility that I experienced, like from how you described this idea of, noticing what the people you admire, like how they hold this idea of healing. Um, and it occurred to me, like the way I have come to define healing myself, as I mentioned, like when we create from the sense of race or whatever emotional state we may be in, when we allow ourselves to direct that energy toward creating, toward building something beautiful, it actually has this effect of healing. What I understand to be healing in this context is the repairing of damaged relationships. And that takes me when we apply it to self. Of course, healing damaged relationships with other people. Like it's easy to grasp that. And we see why philanthropy ought to prioritize that, right? And be super intentional about doing that. But when we take it to self and this idea of self trust, I notice how people are resonating over in the chat with with this notion. I'm going to invite everyone to. We're going to transition from here into some Q&A. So get your questions ready in the last few minutes. Uh, but this notion of repairing the way in which I've been damaged, being intentional about revisiting my conditioning, the ways in which I have been socialized to perpetuate these dominant white centric, right, values and norms that reinforce a hierarchy of human needs, right, of human worth and value. Like the fact that I still to this day unintentionally do that, that to me is healing too. And so there's an old saying that the obstacle is the path. It's not to say like this is wrong, something is wrong with me for still perpetuating the stuff that I'm working against with so much energy and fervor. It's actually to be compassionate with myself as this happens. To say, you know what, I have to accept that this is a part of the process, that it's going to take time. And so I want us to all think about how change may happen at the speed of trust, but progress happens at the pace of change, right? The pace, the way in which we allow time for this process to unfold is critical to the ways in which we'll experience progress, even on an individual level, even related to how we experience healing.
Yeah.
Let me catch my breath.
Marcus, I see a question from Sarah Watson. Supporting
Awesome.
policy systems change requires many different groups to work together with funding. How can funding practices change specifically to align with what's needed for major change? For example, funding time for building relationships, which is not easily counted as a deliverable.
Yeah, fire away.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, multi-year general operating support and authentic trusting relationships between funders and the grantees is what we need, so that everything is not expected as a deliverable, but funders are actually listening to grantees saying, look, this is what we need to do to achieve the kinds of things we're wanting to achieve in the world, to solve this thorny problem. And then they need to believe us when we say those things, and fund us to do those things. So, I mean, the sort of rigid deliverables that many funders are still requiring, it's just, it's not helpful.
I
I don't know,
agree.
you might have further.
Only, I totally agree. I only, and then let's Aaron, after I finish, if you wouldn't mind reading that last question. My take on this is that there's a way in which I like to look to the economic development world. Whenever there's a large tract of land, they do some testing, right? They test the land to see if there's any toxins in place that need to be cured before building upon it. But that process involves engaging the community, some scenario planning, right? You do the community meeting, you go through the different options of what's possible. They show you some schematics of we could build this, or this, and then people weigh in on that. I've often imagined, like, what if philanthropy had this kind of engagement with the people within community to identify options for investment strategies, right? Also to share information that is being learned in real time through the networks, in particular, like privileged discussions and research that is often funded and convened through our philanthropic activities. And so basically I'm saying we can focus on the culture of philanthropy, so then to make sure that the form follows the function, right? That we organize ourselves in such a way where the people closest to the issues and the work are more engaged in the design and not just the evaluation of our work. So like start there, and then allow the people to share their ideas. Like you said, believe folks, give the space in the room, acknowledge the voice of the people who care most about the issues.
Awesome. Thanks, Marcus. I'm going to answer Nicole's question, and then I'm going to let you answer Jessica's question.
Awesome.
So Nicole asked, how can grantees who have no power in these relationships get philanthropy to change? Well, I would challenge you that you have no power. You don't really not have any power.
Right.
And Ncrp has nonprofit members and foundation members. And one of the things we work with our nonprofit members on is understanding the power that you actually do have.
Yes.
And you can influence funders. You just have to understand the power you have and then wield it. Yeah, I could go on for a long time,
Yeah,
but we're running up on time limits. So,
I agree.
and then
I agree,
Jessica's
Aaron.
question,
Yeah, I agree.
Jessica's
And I'll
question
just,
for you.
yeah,
Go
I'll
ahead.
segue and respond to Jessica's question. What Aaron said, absolutely. Come together within these organizations. We represent communities of individuals who share an aspiration for how we want the world to be. And together we learn about our real power. We experience it firsthand. I would offer to do that power is experiential, and requires coming together and expressing that thing, right? Moving toward a different way, expressing your ideas, expressing your observations, and then planning for action. And so you won't really feel it unless you do that. And the extent to which you do that, you'll feel it more and more. It'll become more real. Same for Jessica. How ironic. The response is similar. How do you foster hope and trust in other people in the future, particularly while being surrounded by horrible and current events? The thing is, we have certain things in our control, right? You ever heard the term, the saying, control the controllables, right? I'm not suggesting that we know what we have control over, but let's not eliminate the possibility that we have control over more than what we think, right? So come together with peers. Don't operate alone. Um, Continue to be audacious. Dare to reimagine. Dare to be aspirational in your thinking and not just restrict yourself to practical, warmed over approaches to doing this work that have already proven unsuccessful. But dare to step outside of your comfort zone and do things differently. This is the only way that learning has ever happened. And we can do this together in ways that will produce a broader set of possibilities. Yeah. Aaron, in closing out, do you want to leave? We know we have a couple of other questions, but is there a way in which we can uh, let people know how to contact you and learn a little bit more about Ncrp?
Sure. Yeah. A Dorfman at ncrp.org, or visit our website. Yeah, happy to be in relationship with everybody who's on here, and want to offer thanks to Upswell and Independent Sector for creating this space. And my parting thought for everyone is, find yourself a couple of really close, trusted peers that you can lean on, like I have with Marcus. That those kinds of relationships, nurture them. It helps you stay sane in this crazy work and this crazy world, and it helps us get the results that we want to see for our communities.
Well said.
How about you? Closing thoughts, Marcus?
Man, I'll just say what he said. Aaron, I love you, man. Thank you so much. Let's keep doing this together. Thank you, Dan and team at Independent Sector. Thanks to everyone who participated in this. Connect with us offline. Check us out at geofunders.org. Walton at geofunders.org is my Gmail email. And we're all in this together. Stay well.